Deho pressed his face against the cold metal of the airlock window. Outside, the ancient space station turned slowly against the red glow of a dying star. The station was huge, bigger than any Velkan ship he had ever seen. Its metal walls were dark and silent, but light still blinked along its surface like sleeping eyes. "Are you sure this is safe?" asked his partner, Yeon-su. She checked her weapon for the third time in 10 minutes. Her green skin showed patches of nervous yellow, the way all Velkans looked when they were scared. "The scans show no life signs," Deho said. He was young for an archaeologist, only 30 cycles old. Most Velkans his age were still learning basic dig techniques. But Deho had always been different. He found old things that others missed. He understood the past in ways that made his teachers uncomfortable. Elder Mirkan floated behind them, in his mobility chair. His old body could not handle the gravity of most worlds anymore, but his mind was still sharp. "Human stations have been empty for 50 years, he said. They all left at the same time. No one knows why. No one knows where they went." Deho nodded. Every child in the galaxy knew the story. One day humans were everywhere. They traded with every species, explored every system, built cities on 1,000 worlds. The next day they were gone. All of them. Not dead, just gone. Their cities were empty but still working. Their ships floated in space with no one inside. Even their homeworld, Earth, was empty. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. The 3 Velkans floated into the station. Deho turned on his light and looked around. The hallway was clean and white. The air was breathable. Somewhere in the walls, machines hummed quietly, keeping everything working after all these years. "This way," Deho said, following his scanner. The device beeped faster as they moved deeper into the station. "There's a big room ahead, some kind of communication center." They passed through several rooms. Each one was perfectly clean, as if the humans had just stepped out for a moment. In one room, Deho saw half-finished meals on tables. In another, there were books lying open, as if someone had been reading them. Everything was frozen in time. The communication center was enormous. Screens covered every wall from floor to ceiling. Most were dark, but one large screen in the center still glowed with soft blue light. Strange symbols moved across it in patterns that hurt Deho's eyes to watch. "It's still broadcasting," Yeon-su whispered. She pointed to a set of speakers, near the ceiling. A low humming sound came from them, like voices talking very quietly in another room. Deho moved to the main control panel. His people had studied human technology for decades. The symbols on the screens were in dozens of different languages. Some were Velkan. Others belonged to species he had never heard of. "Elder," he called. "You need to see this." Mirkan's chair floated over. The old Velkan looked at the screens for a long moment. His skin turned pale blue, the color of deep thought. "It's a message," he said finally. The same message, repeated in every language they knew. Deho touched a control. The quiet humming became louder, clearer. A human voice spoke in perfect Velkan. "To all sentient species, we leave behind what we have learned, not as rulers, but as gardeners. The seeds we planted will grow long after the gardeners are gone. In the archives below, you will find our gifts to the galaxy. Use them wisely, protect the small and innocent, help each other grow. We go with love and hope for your future." The message repeated. First in Velkan, then in Karathi, then in Zephyrian, then in languages Deho had never heard. Each time, the voice was different, but the words were the same. "Arrogant," Elder Mirkan said. His skin showed flashes of angry red. "Even when they leave, they think they know what's best for everyone else. Gardeners, as if we were plants to be tended." But Deho was not listening. He had found something else. Another control panel, hidden behind a sliding wall. When he touched it, new screens came to life. These showed star maps, trade routes, and lists of worlds he recognized. "Look at this," he said. The others came closer. "These are shipping records for the last 200 years. The records were detailed and careful. Every shipment was listed, every delivery recorded. But something was strange about them. food and medicine sent to worlds that had suffered disasters, technology delivered to species that were struggling to advance, defensive weapons given to planets that were about to be attacked. They knew, Yansu said quietly. They knew what was going to happen before it happened. Deho scrolled through more records. Medical supplies sent to Karathi colonies just before a plague hit. Evacuation ships sent to Nexari worlds just before volcanic eruptions. Food sent to Velkan settlements just before their crops failed. How could they know? He asked. Elder Mirkan was quiet for a long time. His skin had turned gray, the color of confusion and fear. Maybe they didn't know, he said finally. Maybe they made these things happen. No, Deho said. He had found something else. A personal log, recorded by a human named Captain Martinez. The man's face appeared on one of the screens. He looked tired and sad. We can't save everyone, the human said. But we can try to save as many as possible. The Karathi colonies on Sigma 7 will face plague in 6 months. Dr. Kim's team has developed a vaccine. We need to get it to them without them knowing where it came from. If they think we're controlling them, they'll reject our help. More logs followed. Hundreds of them. All showing humans working in secret to help other species. Not to control them, but to protect them. Not as rulers, but as guardians that no one was supposed to see. They were watching over us. Deho whispered. All of us. For centuries. The final log showed the same tired captain, but now he looked even sadder. The evacuation is complete, he said. All human colonies have been abandoned. All citizens have been moved to the transport ships. Earth is empty except for the maintenance systems. We leave everything working so the others will be safe when we're gone. The log ended. The screens went dark except for the one still broadcasting the message in 100 languages. Deho, Yansu, and Elder Mirkan floated in silence. Around them, the empty station hummed with the sound of machines still working, still protecting, still caring for a galaxy that would never see their makers again. Outside the window, the dying star pulsed red light across the station's hull, but inside the light still bled and the message still played, and somewhere in the archives below, the gifts of humanity waited to be discovered. We need to go to Earth, Deho said finally. Elder Mirkan looked at him with surprise. Why? Because if they left gifts here, Deho said, imagine what they left at home. Sungmin had been a trader for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like this. His cargo ship, the Swift Current, was under attack by Vaxan pirates, and he was going to die. The pirates had bigger guns, faster ships, and no mercy for traders who carried food to poor colonies. Surrender your cargo or be destroyed, the pirate captain's voice crackled over the radio. 3 pirate ships surrounded Sungmin's small vessel. Their weapons were already charging for the kill. Sungmin closed his eyes and prepared to give up. Then something impossible happened. The pirate ships stopped moving. Not slowing down, not turning away. They stopped completely, as if invisible. Hands had grabbed them. Their engines went dark. Their weapons powered down. Their radio signals cut to silence. What did you do? The pirate captain's voice came back, but now it sounded scared and confused. I didn't do anything, Sungmin said. He checked his instruments. His ship was fine. Everything worked normally. But the 3 pirate ships hung in space like broken toys. Slowly, the pirate ships began to drift away from the trade route. Their engines came back online, but only enough to move at very slow speeds. A new voice came over the radio, speaking in perfect Karathi. Hostile vessels have been disabled. Trade vessel, you are free to continue your journey. Have a safe trip. But there was no one else nearby. No military ships, no space stations, nothing. Sungmin was alone with 3 disabled pirate ships in an empty star system. He checked his scanners again and again, but they showed nothing. Who are you? He called into the radio. No answer came. The pirate ships continued to drift away, their captains probably wondering the same thing. Sungmin finished his journey to the Nexari colonies, but he could not stop thinking about what had happened. Over the next few months, He heard similar stories from other traders. Pirates and raiders would attack, then suddenly their ships would break down. But only the bad guys. The traders were always safe. On Temis 7, Hyejin was having her own strange experiences. She was a botanist, a scientist who studied plants. Her job was to help the colonists grow enough food to survive on their new world. It was hard work. The soil was poor, the weather was bad, and most crops from other worlds would not grow there. But the human crops were different. 50 years ago, human settlers had lived on Temis 7. When they left, they had abandoned their farms, but the plants they had brought kept growing, not just growing, getting better. Hyejin walked through the old human farmland, taking notes on her tablet. The wheat was taller than it should be. The corn was more nutritious than the record said it should be. The fruit trees produced bigger, sweeter fruit every year. It doesn't make sense, she told her assistant, a young Korathi named Byung-ho. Plants don't improve themselves this fast. Evolution takes millions of years, not decades. Byung-ho pointed to a section of the field where new plants were growing. What about those? I've never seen them before. Hyejin looked where he was, pointing. Strange plants grew between the human crops. They were small and green, with leaves that seemed to sparkle in the sunlight. She had been studying this area for 3 years, and these plants had never been there before. She took a sample and ran it through her portable lab. The results made her sit down in surprise. The new plants were fixing nitrogen in the soil, making it richer and better for growing food. They were also producing natural pest control chemicals that kept harmful insects away from the crops. It's like they know what the other plants need, she whispered. Over the next weeks, Hyejin watched the mysterious plants spread throughout the farmland. Wherever they grew, the human crops became healthier and stronger. The colonists' food supplies improved. Children who had been thin and weak became healthy and strong. But the strangest thing was that the plants only grew where they were needed. In areas where the soil was already good, no new plants appeared. They only came where the crops were struggling. Meanwhile, in the war room of the Zephyrian Empire, General Tae-wan was getting very frustrated. His people were strong and proud warriors. For generations, they had expanded their territory by conquering weaker species. It was the natural way of things, he believed. The strong should rule the weak. But lately, every military campaign had failed in bizarre ways. Explain to me again how we lost an entire fleet to a solar storm, Tae-wan said to his science officer, Commander In-soo. In-soo looked uncomfortable. Her scales showed the pale colors of confusion and fear. Sir, the storm came from nowhere. Our weather stations detected nothing until it was right on top of us. It disabled our ships but caused no permanent damage. When it passed, we found ourselves in empty space far from our target. Tae-wan pulled up more reports on his screen. 3 months ago, his invasion fleet had been redirected by mysterious gravitational anomalies. 6 months ago, an asteroid field had appeared overnight, blocking their attack on a peaceful farming world. A year ago, spatial distortions had sent his entire army to the wrong star system. And in every case, Tae-wan said, we were attacking species that had never hurt anyone. Yes, sir, In-soo said quietly. But when we fought the Krav raiders who were attacking our colonies, nothing strange happened. No, sir. That battle went normally. Tae-wan stood up and walked to the large window that looked out into space. Stars twinkled in the darkness, peaceful and beautiful. Somewhere out there, invisible forces were protecting the innocent and redirecting the aggressive. But what forces? And why? He thought about the humans. 50 years ago, they had been the most powerful species in the galaxy. Not because they had the biggest weapons or the strongest armies, but because everyone trusted them. When there was a dispute between species, humans mediated. When there was a disaster, humans sent aid. When pirates attacked trade routes, human patrol ships appeared to drive them away. Then they had vanished all at once, leaving no explanation. In-soo, Tae-wan said slowly. What if the humans didn't really leave? Sir? What if they're still here, just Hidden? Watching us? Insu thought about this. But sir, we've searched the entire galaxy. There are no human ships, no human colonies, no human signals. Maybe they don't need ships anymore, Taiwan said. Maybe they built something else. Something we can't see. That night, Sungmin received a message while his ship was docked at a space station. The message came through normal communication channels, but the sender was listed as unknown. Captain Sungmin, the message said in perfect Karathi. Your cargo runs to the outer colonies are helping many people. Keep up the good work. A friend? Sungmin stared at the message. No one knew his exact cargo routes except himself and his customers. No one called him captain. He was just a small-time trader with one old ship. He checked the message logs, but there was no record of how the message had arrived. It was as if someone had placed it directly into his computer without using any communication system at all. Similar messages were appearing all over the galaxy. Doctors received anonymous tips about new treatments. Scientists found research data that helped them solve difficult problems. Engineers discovered better designs for their machines. Always the messages came to people who were helping others, never to those who caused harm. Heejin found a new message on her tablet the next morning. Dr. Heejin, your work with sustainable farming is making a difference. Check the old human greenhouse for something that might help your research. Oh, friend. She had never told anyone she was thinking about checking the abandoned human buildings. The thought had only occurred to her the night before, lying in bed. In the greenhouse, she found something that made her heart race. A small device, about the size of her hand, with a screen that showed genetic patterns of plants. But not just any plants, the exact plants she was trying to improve for the colonists. The device contained thousands of genetic modifications that would make crops grow better in Temis 7's harsh environment. Each modification was carefully designed to work with the planet's specific soil and weather conditions. On the screen, a simple message appeared. From the gardeners who came before, to the gardeners who come after. Use with wisdom. All across the galaxy. People were starting to realize that humanity's departure had not left them alone. Something was still watching, still protecting, still helping. Something that cared about life and growth and peace. But what was it? And how was it? Everywhere at once? The mystery was growing deeper every day. Jiwoo had always been proud of her people's greatest invention. The Nexari quantum communication system could send messages instantly across the galaxy. No other species had ever managed to build anything like it. It was proof that the Nexari were among the smartest beings in the universe. But now, staring at the mathematical formulas on her screen, Jiwoo felt sick to her stomach. These equations aren't ours, she whispered to herself in her laboratory. She was alone, working late, into the night as she often did. The quantum communication project was her life's work, but what she had discovered tonight would change everything. The mathematical principles that made quantum communication possible were incredibly complex. Jiwoo had spent 10 years learning them from her teachers who had learned them from their teachers, going back 5 generations to the great inventor Vorketh. Everyone believed that Vorketh had discovered these principles through pure Nexari genius. But hidden deep in the oldest research files, Jiwoo had found something disturbing. The original equations were not in Vorketh's handwriting. They were not even in the Nexari language. They were in human mathematical notation, carefully translated into Nexari symbols. Jiwoo pulled up more files on her computer. The medical nanobots that saved millions of Nexari lives every year. The faster-than-light engines that powered their ships. The environmental systems that kept their cities clean and safe. All of them contained traces of human mathematics, hidden so well that no one had noticed for 200 years. We didn't invent any of it, she said out loud. Her voice echoed in the empty laboratory. They gave it all to us, and made us think we discovered it ourselves. The next morning, Jiwoo called her friend Woo Jin, a historian who specialized in ancient records. They met at a small cafe near the university, a place where they had often discussed their research over hot drinks. I need you to look into something, Jiwoo said. She handed Woo Jin a datapad with her findings. Look at the dates when our greatest discoveries were made, then compare them to human activity in our space. Wu Jin was a careful researcher. She studied the data for several days before calling Ji Wu back. When they met again, Wu Jin's normally cheerful face was pale and serious. "You're right," Wu Jin said quietly. "Every major breakthrough in Nexari history happened shortly after humans visited our worlds. But it's not just us. I checked the records for other species too." She pulled out her own data pad and showed Ji Wu a timeline that covered the last 1,000 years. Every species in the galaxy had experienced periods of rapid technological advancement, new medical treatments that saved their populations from disease, new energy systems that ended their power shortages, new defensive technologies that protected them from threats, and every single breakthrough had happened after contact with humans. "Look at this," Wu Jin said, pointing to a section of the timeline. "The Karathi were facing extinction from a plague 500 years ago. They had no cure, no way to stop it from spreading. Then human traders visited their worlds, and suddenly their scientists discovered a new type of medicine that could cure any disease." "The Velkans?" Ji Wu asked. "Same pattern. Their sun was dying 300 years ago. They had no way to save their home world. Human explorers came through their system, and within a year, Velkan scientists had figured out how to build stellar engineering equipment that could restore their star." Ji Wu felt her hands shaking. "They saved everyone, every species that could have gone extinct, every civilization that could have failed. The humans prevented it all. But they made it look like we saved ourselves," Wu Jin said. "They never took credit. They never asked for anything in return. They just helped, and then pretended they hadn't done anything." The two friends sat in silence for a while, drinking their tea and thinking about what this meant. Finally, Ji Wu spoke. "Why did they hide it? Why not just openly help us?" Wu Jin had been thinking about the same question. "Maybe because if we knew they were helping us, we would become dependent on them, like children who never learn to take care of themselves because their parents do everything for them. So they helped us in secret and let us think we were doing it ourselves. It makes us strong and confident instead of weak and dependent." Ji Wu nodded slowly. It made sense, but it also made her feel strange. Her entire life's work, everything she was proud of, had been built on foundations laid by humans. Was any of it really hers? Across the galaxy, a young Karathi named Jun Ho was making his own disturbing discovery. He worked for the Galactic Postal Service, managing the communication networks that connected hundreds of worlds. It was boring work most of the time, but it gave him access to historical records that few people ever saw. Late one night, while investigating a technical problem, Jun Ho found something odd in the communication logs. For the past 200 years, there had been mysterious data transmissions between human space and every other species' homeworlds. The transmissions were hidden, encrypted, and sent on frequencies that were barely detectable. But Jun Ho was very good with computers. He managed to decode a few of the transmissions, and what he found made him sit back in his chair with shock. The transmissions were medical data, genetic information about diseases that hadn't been discovered yet, treatments for illnesses that wouldn't appear for decades, vaccines for plagues that had never happened. The humans had been sending this information to doctors and scientists across the galaxy, but always in ways that made it look like the recipients had discovered it themselves. A research paper would appear in a scientific journal with no author listed. A medical supply shipment would be delivered to the wrong address, but exactly where a doctor needed it most. A computer virus would accidentally download treatment protocols into hospital databases. Jun Ho traced the pattern back through the records. Every time a species had faced a medical crisis, the humans had already sent them the solution, sometimes years in advance. They had prevented countless disasters that no one else even knew were coming. How did they know? He wondered. How could they predict diseases that hadn't evolved yet? In another part of the galaxy, an elderly Velkan named Kyun Wu was having trouble sleeping. He had been a military historian all his life, studying battles and wars and conflicts. But lately, the more he studied, the less sense anything made. Every major war in galactic history had ended strangely. Just when one species was about to destroy another, something would happen to stop the fighting. A natural disaster would force both sides to work together. A new trade opportunity would make them allies instead of enemies. A technological breakthrough would solve the problem they were fighting over. Kyun-woo had never paid much attention to these patterns before. He had assumed they were just lucky coincidences. But now, reading about humanity's mysterious disappearance, he began to see connections. The humans had been present in some way at every major turning point in galactic history, not as conquerors or rulers, but as mediators and peacekeepers. When species were about to destroy each other, humans found ways to help them solve their problems peacefully, but they had always worked behind the scenes. When the Karathi and Nexari went to war over mining rights, it was Karathi diplomats who suggested the peace treaty. When the Velkans and Zephyrians fought over territory, it was Zephyrian leaders who proposed sharing the disputed space. When smaller species were threatened by larger ones, it was their own people who developed the defensive technologies that saved them. In every case, the solutions had human fingerprints all over them, if you knew how to look. Kyun-woo realized that the galaxy had been at peace for centuries, not because its species were naturally peaceful, but because humans had been carefully, quietly preventing every war before it could truly begin. Back on her homeworld, Ji-woo called a meeting with other researchers who had been making similar discoveries. Scientists, historians, engineers, and doctors gathered in a university conference room to share what they had learned. The picture that emerged was incredible and terrifying. For over 1,000 years, humans had been secretly guiding the development of every species in the galaxy, not controlling them, but protecting them, teaching them, helping them grow. Like parents watching over children, but invisible parents, who let the children think they were doing everything on their own. "We've all been their children," said Dr. Yanwoo, an elderly Nexari medical researcher, "and we never even knew we had parents." "The question is," Ji-woo said, "if they were protecting us for so long, why did they leave? What happened 50 years ago that made them abandon us?" No one in the room had an answer, but they all knew that whatever had driven humanity away must have been something terrible, something so dangerous that even the guardians of the galaxy had been forced to run. And now, for the first time in 1,000 years, the children of the galaxy were truly alone. Yujin had always loved looking at star maps. As an astrophysicist, she spent her days studying the movement of stars, planets, and cosmic phenomena across the galaxy. The universe followed patterns, she believed. Everything had a reason, a cause, a logical explanation. But the star map she was looking at now made no sense at all. "Run the calculation again," she told her computer. She was alone in her observatory, high in the mountains of her homeworld. Outside, the night sky sparkled with billions of stars, but inside, Yujin stared at data that challenged everything she thought she knew about physics. The computer finished its work and displayed the results. Yujin sat back in her chair feeling dizzy. The numbers were the same as before, impossible but undeniably real. 50 years ago, the galaxy should have been destroyed. According to her calculations, a massive wave of dark energy had been heading straight for their sector of space. The wave was enormous, bigger than anything scientists had ever detected. It would have sterilized hundreds of star systems, killing every living thing on thousands of worlds. The wave should have reached them exactly 51 years ago, but it never arrived. Yujin checked her data again and again. The evidence was clear in the cosmic background radiation, in the gravitational readings, in the electromagnetic signatures left behind by the wave's passage. The dark energy storm had been real. It had been coming straight for them. And then somehow it had been redirected. But how? She whispered to herself. How do you redirect something that massive? She spent the next 3 days running simulations on her computer, trying to figure out what could have changed the wave's course. Every answer she found seemed more impossible than the last. To redirect a dark energy wave of that size, someone would need to manipulate gravity on a galactic scale. They would need to move entire star systems, create artificial black holes, or fold space-time itself. The amount of energy required would be equivalent to the output of billions of stars. No, single species could do such a thing. Even if every civilization in the galaxy worked together, they would not have the technology or the power. But someone had done it. The evidence was right there in her data. Yujin called her colleague, Min Ho, a quantum physicist who worked at the university in the capital city. Min Ho was brilliant and creative, the kind of scientist who thought about problems from angles that no one else considered. "I need you to look at something," Yujin said when Min Ho answered his communication device. "Can you come to the observatory tonight?" "What's so urgent that it can't wait until morning?" Min Ho asked, but his voice was already interested. Yujin only called him when she had found something truly extraordinary. That evening, Min Ho arrived at the observatory carrying his portable analysis equipment. Yujin showed him the data, the calculations, the simulations. Min Ho studied everything carefully, asking questions and running his own tests. Finally, he looked up at Yujin with an expression of wonder and fear. "You're right," he said quietly. "The wave was real and it was redirected. But Yujin, the technology required to do this, it's beyond anything we can imagine. Whoever did this had to sacrifice enormous amounts of energy, possibly entire civilizations' worth of energy." "What do you mean?" Min Ho pulled up a new calculation on his tablet. "To create the gravitational effects needed to redirect the wave, you would need to accelerate massive objects to near the speed of light, not just ships or space stations. Entire populations, possibly entire planets' worth of mass." Yujin felt cold. "Are you saying someone used themselves as ammunition?" "I'm saying someone turned their entire civilization into a living shield," Min Ho said. "They accelerated themselves into the path of the dark energy wave, using their own mass and energy to create a gravitational redirect. It would have sent them beyond the galactic rim, into empty space between galaxies." The two scientists sat in silence, thinking about what this meant. Someone had sacrificed everything to save the galaxy, not just their technology or their resources, but their entire species. They had thrown themselves into the darkness so that everyone else could live. "When did this happen?" Min Ho asked. Yujin checked her timeline. 51 years ago, just 1 year before humanity disappeared. They looked at each other with dawning realization. "The humans," Yujin whispered. Over the next week, Yujin and Min Ho worked together to trace the evidence. They studied gravitational anomalies, energy signatures, and the faint trails left behind by objects moving at incredible speeds. Every piece of data pointed to the same conclusion. 51 years ago, humanity had detected the approaching dark energy wave. They had calculated that it would destroy most of the galaxy, including all the species they had spent centuries protecting and nurturing. So they had made an impossible choice. The entire human species, every man, woman, and child had boarded their ships and launched themselves into space, not to escape, but to create a barrier. They had accelerated their entire civilization to near light speed, using their combined mass to create gravitational effects that would redirect the deadly wave. The plan had worked. The dark energy storm had been deflected away from inhabited space, sent harmlessly into the empty void between galaxies. The galaxy was saved, but humanity was gone. Not dead, but exiled beyond the rim of the galaxy, traveling through the endless darkness between stars. Even if they were still alive out there, they could never return. The distance was too great, the journey too long. "They saved everyone," Min Ho said, his voice full of amazement and sorrow. "Every living thing in the galaxy owes its existence to humanity's sacrifice." "And no one knew," Yujin added. "If we hadn't found this data, no one would ever have known what they did for us." The two scientists decided they had to tell others about their discovery. Yujin sent copies of her data to colleagues across the galaxy. Min Ho published papers in scientific journals. Slowly, the truth began to spread. On distant worlds, other scientists verified the calculations. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Humanity had sacrificed itself to save the galaxy from destruction, but there was more evidence to be found. So young, a linguist who studied ancient human communications, made her own discovery while analyzing the last human transmissions from 51 years ago. So Young had spent years learning human languages, fascinated by their complexity and beauty. She had access to the final broadcasts from human worlds, the last messages sent before the species disappeared. Most of them were routine communications, business transactions, personal messages between friends and family, but hidden in the data, streams encrypted in ways that had taken her decades to decode. So Young found something else, a final transmission, sent from Earth to every human colony at the same time. The message was simple and heartbreaking. Citizens of humanity, the time has come for us to fulfill our greatest purpose. The darkness approaches, and only we can stand against it. We go gladly into the void so that others might remain in the light. Take comfort in knowing that our sacrifice will ensure the survival of every species we have come to love. Tell your children that we go not in anger or fear, but in hope and joy. The garden we have tended will bloom long after the gardeners are gone. Remember us not as we were, but as the silence we leave behind, a silence that speaks of love. So Young read the message over and over, tears streaming down her face. She had been studying humanity for decades, but she had never truly understood them until now. They had not just been protectors and guardians. They had been parents to the entire galaxy, willing to sacrifice everything for their children. The final human transmission had been sent exactly 1 year before their disappearance. 1 year to say goodbye, to prepare their spirits, to make peace with their choice. Then they had done what no other species would have done. They had saved everyone else by destroying themselves. As news of these discoveries spread across the galaxy, different species reacted in different ways. Some, like the proud Zephyrians, felt ashamed that they had needed saving. Others, like the peaceful Karathi, felt overwhelming gratitude. Still others wondered if humanity had been right to make such a choice without asking anyone else. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. For 50 years they had thought they were alone, abandoned by their protectors. Now they knew the truth. They were not alone. They were loved. Loved so much that an entire species had chosen to die for them. Somewhere beyond the galactic rim, in the cold darkness between galaxies, humanity was still out there, still traveling, still alive perhaps, but never able to return home. And in the galaxy they had saved, the children they had raised, were finally beginning to understand what it truly meant to love someone more than yourself. The Great Assembly had been built to host gatherings of dozens of species, but it had never seen anything like this. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy filled the massive chamber. Velkans, Karathi, Nexari, Zephyrians, and hundreds of other species sat together in the circular hall, all united by the same purpose. They were here to decide what to do about humanity. Dong-hyun, now an elderly leader among the Velkan people, stood at the center of the assembly. His skin showed the deep blue patterns of wisdom and age. Around him, the chamber buzzed with quiet conversations in dozens of languages, but everyone fell silent when he began to speak. "Friends," Dong-hyun said, his voice carrying across the vast space. "We are gathered here today because we have learned a truth that changes everything. For 1,000 years, humanity watched over us. 50 years ago, they sacrificed themselves to save us. The question before us now is simple. What do we do with this knowledge?" A young Zephyrian named Jae-hyun stood up in his section of the assembly. His scales showed the aggressive red patterns of anger and pride. "What we do is question everything," he said loudly. "Humanity treated us like children who could not take care of themselves. They made decisions for us without asking our permission. They manipulated our development for centuries. How is this different from what any conqueror does?" Murmurs of agreement came from parts of the assembly. Many species felt uncomfortable learning that their greatest achievements had been guided by human hands. But Yunju, an elderly Karathi scientist, stood to respond. Her feathers showed the silver patterns of deep thought. "Young Jae-hyun speaks of conquest, but I see something different. Conquerors take credit for their victories. They demand payment for their services. They rule through fear and force. Humanity did none of these things. They helped us and asked for nothing. They saved us and took no credit. They died for us and expected no gratitude. But they still controlled us, Jae-hyun insisted. They still decided what was best for us without asking what we wanted. A new voice joined the debate. Kyung-soo, a young philosopher from the Nixari world, stood up in the center section. Perhaps, he said carefully, we are asking the wrong question. Instead of asking whether humanity was right to help us, perhaps we should ask why they felt they needed to. The assembly grew quiet, waiting for him to continue. I have studied the historical records, Kyung-soo said. Before humanity's influence, our galaxy was a violent place. Species destroyed each other over resources. Weaker civilizations were enslaved or wiped out by stronger ones. Plagues and disasters killed billions because no one shared medical knowledge or offered aid. He gestured to the diverse crowd around him. Look at this assembly. Hundreds of species sitting together peacefully, working together to solve a problem. When in the history of the galaxy has such a thing ever happened? The answer is, only after humanity began their work. Kyung-soo's words made many representatives think. It was true that the modern galaxy was remarkably peaceful compared to ancient times. Wars still happened, but they were small and short. Most disputes were settled through negotiation rather than violence. Species helped each other during disasters instead of taking advantage of weakness. Humanity's greatest gift to us, Kyung-soo continued, was not their technology or their protection. It was teaching us to protect each other. While the assembly debated, a young Karathi communications officer named Hai-wan was working in the technical center below the meeting hall. Her job was to monitor radio signals and manage the communication systems that allowed species across the galaxy to participate in the assembly. But today, her equipment was picking up something strange. It was a signal from beyond the galactic rim, faint and difficult to detect. At first, Hai-wan thought it might be interference from a nearby star. But as she listened more carefully, she realized it was something else entirely. It was music. The signal carried the sound of voices singing, in harmony. Not just a few voices, but hundreds, maybe thousands. They sang in a language that Hai-wan recognized as human, though she could not understand the words. Her hands shaking with excitement, Hai-wan recorded the signal and enhanced it using every tool at her disposal. The song became clearer, more beautiful. It was not a recording. These were living voices, singing together in real time, somewhere in the darkness between galaxies. Hai-wan called her supervisor, but then thought better of it. This was too important to go through normal channels. She opened a direct communication, linked to the assembly hall above. Assembly leaders, she said, her voice trembling. I need you to hear something. In the great hall, Dong-hyun paused the debate. Hai-wan's voice came through the speakers, followed by the sound she had detected. The most beautiful singing that any of them had ever heard echoed through the chamber. Every representative in the assembly fell silent. Velkans, Karathi, Nexari, Saphirians, and hundreds of others listened to the voices of humanity, still alive, still singing, somewhere in the vast darkness beyond their galaxy. Bo Young, the assembly's chief linguist, stood up slowly. She had spent her entire career studying human languages and culture. Tears streamed down her face as she listened to the song. Can you translate it? Dong-hyun asked gently. Bo Young nodded, though her voice shook as she spoke. They are singing about their children, about watching a garden grow, about the joy of seeing someone you love become strong and independent. She paused, listening more carefully. The final verse says, "The children are grown, the garden blooms. We are content." The song continued for several more minutes, then faded away. The assembly sat in complete silence, each representative lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Dong-hyun spoke. It seems that humanity has given us one more gift. They have shown us that they are at peace with their choice. They do not regret their sacrifice. They are proud of what we have become. Jae-hyun, the young Zephyrian who had spoken against humanity earlier, stood up again. But now his scales showed different colors, the deep purple of humility and respect. "I was wrong," he said simply. "A parent does not ask permission to protect their child from danger. A gardener does not consult with flowers before watering them. Humanity acted as they did because they loved us, not because they wanted to control us." Over the next several hours, the assembly reached a consensus. They would not debate whether humanity had been right or wrong to help them. Instead, they would focus on how to honor humanity's legacy. The decision they made was simple but profound. Each species would commit to doing for other civilizations what humanity had done for them. They would watch over younger species, protect them from disasters, and help them grow strong and independent, but they would do it openly, as equals, not as hidden guardians. They would also maintain the systems that humanity had left behind, the automated defenses that protected peaceful ships, the genetic modifications that helped crops grow, the medical technologies that saved lives. These gifts would continue to help future generations. Most importantly, they would remember. Every child in the galaxy would learn the story of humanity's sacrifice, not as a debt to be repaid, but as an example to be followed. As the assembly prepared to end, Heywan detected the signal again. The human voices were singing once more, but this time the song was different. Bo Young listened carefully and translated. "We hear your voices, children of the stars. We see your kindness to each other. The garden we planted bears fruit. The love we shared continues to grow. And in your songs of peace and hope, we hear the echo of our own hearts, singing forever." The representatives of the Galactic Assembly rose to their feet and began to sing their own songs, Velkan harmonies, Karathi melodies, Nixari rhythms, Zephyrian chants. Each species added their voice to the chorus, creating a symphony that had never been heard before. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the galactic rim, humanity listened to the voices of their children, grown strong and wise and loving, singing, together as one family. The silence after humanity's departure had indeed been louder than storms. It had spoken of love, sacrifice, and hope. It had taught the galaxy that the greatest strength was not in ruling others, but in helping them rule themselves. In the years that followed, when young species discovered faster-than-light travel and joined the galactic community, they would find a galaxy full of protectors and teachers, not hidden guardians working in secret, but open friends offering help and guidance. And when disasters threatened, when conflicts arose, when new challenges emerged, the species of the galaxy would face them together, united by the love that humanity had taught them to share with each other. The children had learned well. The garden bloomed, and in the harmony of 1,000 worlds singing together, humanity's voice could still be heard, not as an echo of the past, but as the melody that would guide the future forever.